Brandon, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm good, Mr. K. How are you?
Good, man. Welcome to the Spots of Love podcast. You're one of the favorites that I had lined up that I couldn't wait to talk to. So I'm super glad that you decided to do this for me. I'm very grateful. So thank you.
Hey, sure, no problem. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, we were just talking about that stand-up Barney behind you. Where is that an actual was that from one of like the displays in the store kind of thing, or is that from something different? Do you know?
That would be my guess. The guy who I bought it from didn't have much of a description for it. Like, oh, it's just a stand-in that I guess would be used for store displays and stuff. I remember I posted this in Barney Retro Collectors, which is another Facebook group. And Joseph Hernandez gave me a little insight on that. Like, yeah, they'd have these in stores, or they'd have these displayed around the office of like publishing, and things like that. So it might be. I wish I had more information on him, but
yeah, with the
cool thing.
Yeah, with the hat on, it looks like if it was a store thing, like it would be either for what Good Day Good Night or the Sleepy Time album that they did.
Yeah. That would it looks like this was taken when they were doing the shots for that album, so maybe this was for that.
Yeah. It's really cool. It's not, how tall does it stand? Is it like only like a 4 or 5 foot kind of thing?
It's about 4.5. I'm like 5'11", and I come a little bit over his hat, but he's pretty tall.
Oh, okay. Nice, man. That's super dope. I like that.
Thanks.
As we get started here on this podcast, the one thing that I usually do with everyone is just start from the very beginning. So I'll ask you the same question I usually ask everyone else. Do you remember, and if you do remember, your introduction to Barney, what that experience was like, experiencing Barney for the first time? Or what's your earliest memory of Barney if you don't remember that introduction?
Yeah. I wish I could remember that first introduction to that. Well, Barney was obviously around before me, but I have 3 older sisters. So my oldest sister, she was born in 1983. And she grew up with more Mr. Rogers, the Sesame era and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And my second sister, she was born in 1989. So that's kind of when Barney hit. And I think my oldest sister, she was passing through like channels and stuff, and she wound it up on PBS and found this is when Barney started airing on PBS in 1992. And she said, "Hey, there's this show on, and I think Stephanie might like it." So she kind of raced her, like, "Come look at this," and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, so she fell in love with it, and then my sister born after her, she was born in 94, and then Barney was already big at that point, as we all know. And so Barney, when I came around in 98, he was just kind of tossed to me. So I think I just always had him around, and he just stuck more with me. So I don't have that much in terms of earliest memories, but I just remember him always being around me.
Dope. Yeah, I've shared on this podcast a few times. That was my same. We kind of have the same story. I have one older sibling. He was born in 92, but he was a Barney fan. And so it was, from the moment I was born, it was just part of my life. And I just stayed with it a lot longer than him or anyone else in the family did. But yeah, we also had that generational kind of thing where it just kind of got passed down. And then I did the same thing in my grandma's daycare, just passing it on to the other generations of kids. So yeah, that's I think we have a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there's a few times that we've talked where we have a few commonalities when it comes to Barney, that being one of them. But also I tell the story of how I used to imitate the show and stand in front of the TV. And I believe you did that same thing, right?
I did, and it was very crazy hearing someone else say that, because I was like, "Hey, I'm not the weird one in the group anymore." But it hit me in a different way. I think I think everyone else watched that show as a kid, just like learning their letters and numbers and how to be polite and things like that. I watched it even from a very young age. I watched it from the eyes of a performer, because I just had the need and want to perform, and just the way Barney moved and his voice and everything, I would imitate it to the point where from start to finish, I would be locked in to that character. I'd be obviously doing the dances and doing the songs, but I would also watch, how Barney moved when he's talking, how he moved when he's not talking, certain ways Bob would inflect lines and how David would gesture to them, whether it's David, Josh, Carey, or Maurice, whoever was in the suit. To the point where I was like, I could emulate any voice, any suit. If you just, even to this day, if you just played me a random scene, I could quote it back to you.
Yeah.
Don't test me now, but I could do that.
Yeah, dude, that's exactly it for me too. You've met my daughters, or my youngest daughter, and
Yes.
She watches Barney and Mr. K all the time. That's it. So watching Barney, I can not be in the room at all. I can listen to whatever. It's like for me, it's so wild because I can listen to whatever the score is without hearing talking and know what video or episode is playing just because of the differences that each one had. They were kind of the same uniform if Bob Singleton did them or Joe Phillips when it came to music, but each of them still had their own kind of unique sound. So yeah, like I'm the same way. I can hear a line or just some music or something and know exactly what episode that it is. I can't do the voice anymore. I used to as a kid. I could watch Backyard Gang Barney or Riff Era Barney and imitate the voice just like that. But my voice has gotten so deep now that I can't even do it anymore. I wish I could.
Yeah.
One weird thing that I used to do with and I wonder if you did this too, when I imitated and acted out Barney, I would do these things. When I was young enough to not realize that it was a costume, there would be times where David, sometimes he would forget, or if you had like Maurice Scott or somebody in the costume, they wouldn't move the mouth so much. There's times where like David would forget to move the mouth, or not necessarily forget, he just didn't move the mouth for a line. So when I would imitate it, I would say the line without moving my mouth too, because I'm like, that's what Barney did. And if I'm Barney, then I can't move my mouth and say this line. Did you ever do that type of stuff?
Somewhat. When I would do it, I would obviously say the lines as he's saying them, and I kind of wouldn't pay too much attention to the mouth. I was just speaking, and I was mostly just emulating stuff with my hands. But there would be certain times if I would watch like a Maurice Scott episode, or like maybe like early David doing Barney. I'd kind of, he would just do a lot of bobbing, so I would do that as I'm talking. But once he added more in sing, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to talk this through.
Man,
I would kind of emulate that bounce.
Yeah, it's so strange that we have those connections, because you do think, when you're growing up, you're the only person that's doing this random thing, and you do think like it's kind of weird, but you enjoy it, so it's cool to you. But when you think back on it, you're like, man, this is kind of a weird thing to do. But then to hear other people, you're the first person that you ever reached out to me and said, like, I think after I did Purple Roads with Carrie, you mentioned like I used to do some of the same stuff. But there's been other people that I've talked to since then who did the exact same thing. So it's just so strange that we share that commonality. But I think that just kind of speaks to who Barney is, right? Because for me, that's where I found my love for music and acting and wanting to be an actor and make music. My earliest memories of that was imitating this show and all the music and things that entailed. You're a puppeteer, and I like to say that you're a professional puppeteer. At this point, do you think that's where your love for puppeteering kind of stemmed from? Is trying to emulate being Barney and that kind of thing?
Oh, definitely. I think because that was a lesson in character study. Yeah. It was more than just doing the voice. Like I said, it was kind of watching how he moved when he's talking, how he moved when he's not talking. Barney has a thought process. That most people, if you have the performing eye, you can catch that. And definitely, I think obviously Scooter and Macetta and the Muppets and all those characters definitely helped along the way. But Barney was my first introduction to I wanted to be a performer. Not so much puppetry, but I wanted to be more of an actor.
Sure.
As myself, but I was also just a very shy kid. And I'm still believe it or not, I'm still a very shy person, but put a puppet on me, you won't know who I am. Yeah. When I was doing that stuff, acting out Barney, I was doing that in like the privacy of my basement or like my room with the door locked and the TV turned up loud. So, I was not keen on doing that. And I think I found that when I found out puppetry could be a job, then I was like, oh my gosh, I can finally take everything I've been doing, these weird character movements, these voices, and, and just put it all. I had to learn, the technique of doing it this way, but it finally gave me such a more freeing environment to do that. And Barney was definitely that lightning bolt that struck me and said, I need to do this.
For sure. When we talk about Barney, do you have, you said it got passed down to you through your sisters, and you were born in kind of like towards the end of the 90s. So Barney was already this huge established character and show. Do you have a favorite era of Barney that you prefer over others?
Definitely the second era, so seasons 4 through 6.
Yeah.
That was my jam. I mean, I had some stuff from the early seasons, and I could connect with it in a way, but this was like ongoing. And by the time I came around, like this is '98, so this is like, I mean, you don't have much memory when you're an infant, so that's like towards the end of
Right.
season 5, season 6, and then by the time I could finally get like mental capacity of what I'm watching, it's like, okay,
Mhm.
this is 2002 through 2002, so this is like reruns all day of seasons 4 through 6. So I got
Okay.
to see everything, and then like home videos that were still coming out at the time. Like I remember seeing at the store, come on over to Barney's house. I remember seeing that on the
Yeah.
shelves and taking it home. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is and hearing, and also not knowing too much. Like Barney's real to me, but then like watching like a Duncan or Tim episode, like something's wrong here, but
Yeah.
I can't quite figure out what it is. Uh, but yeah, that was my whole era was that, and the home videos at that time were just more immaculate
Hmm.
in terms of the sets. Uh, oh shit! Even going back watching to this day, like oh my gosh, they were at their prime during that time.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, they definitely had the money and the willpower to produce these fantastic looking home videos. Something that I don't think any children's Sesame Street did a lot of, and I think they still do some home videos and things. But Follow That Bird and Elmo and Grouchland, they did some very like elaborate videos as well. I
Oh
don't
yeah, yeah,
think any children's shows outside of those two before that or after have really done much of that. Unless they're animation, then you can make these really big. But being a live action show and having these elaborate sets or going to these on location spots, um, Barney and even Sesame Street really pushed the envelope for what children's television could be. Um, just making home videos. They weren't even theatrical releases. Forgetting Great Adventure and those things, just home videos, just straight to store, direct to consumer kind of things. They
yeah.
really were all into those videos. So that I think that is my favorite era when it comes to home videos specifically. What a World We Share. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
all those videos were just like were immaculate for what they were. You said that you could when Duncan and those guys started coming around and Bob left, and you could tell the difference that it was a different person doing the voice.
I could, because there were certain like I said, studying him so hard, you kind of notice those little things, like those little earbuds. You could just tell when something was a little off, especially in those videos, because it was Duncan singing and then Tim speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll see if I can get this right. To go talking like this. Hi everybody, and then now we're singing up here.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
oh, there's something a little bit off pitch, but it's like not off pitch in a bad way, just like a little higher. It's like, oh, he turned into Chuck E. Cheese in 2 seconds.
yeah, that's hilarious. You know what? What's strange is I realized the voice changes, but in my mind it was always the same person.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
I didn't watch I didn't watch Barney like the credits and things. Like when it was over, I took it out and it was time for another one to go in. So even when and I think other fans think that I'm strange for this, but when Dean Wint came around, I thought it was still that I thought it was still Bob until I got older and realized, oh, these are different people. I just thought his voice kept evolving because you think Bob West from season or Musical Castle is a different voice of Bob West than we had heard on the series to me. But that voice coming from Backyard Gang was a vast difference, right? So it wasn't far fetched for me that he could have made his voice even higher as he evolved it. It wasn't until I got older and really looked at the credits that I realized, oh
yeah,
man, these are actually different people.
yeah. And you're not much of a critic as a kid. You kind of,
Yeah,
we're just weird. We're performers, so we kind of hear that, but we still see him as a character. Like I remember when the first episode of season 7 aired. I think I remember some promotion for it in terms
yeah,
of like, okay, a new season of Barney, or maybe something like that. It was like, oh, Barney's coming on, and it's like, okay, here's a new intro. I was like, interesting, and all these
mm-hmm.
like little like bits and clips of like, oh, here's a new set, here's some new kids, like he's looking a little different here, and it's like, whoa, it's like at that age, I'm like, whoa, what's happening? I was like, oh, this looks kind of fresh, like I'm liking
Yeah,
this so far, and then it's that. pan of this new set until we get to like the end where I'm like, oh my gosh, like where are we? I was like, this is pretty interesting. And then he comes to life and we hear Dean for the first time. And again, I don't think I really saw much of that. I didn't see much of a difference there, because, and I think they did it in a good way. I think Tim was pretty close to Bob as well as Duncan, that it wasn't too different. And then I think when Dean started, he started sounding a little close to where Tim left off, that it wasn't too off-putting, in my opinion. Yeah. And then because then obviously Dean changed it over on, but I think he gradually did that to the point where it was just kind of natural at that point. And as a kid, you maybe thought it was different. Like, oh, here's a season 8 episode, and then next episode we're going to show something from season 4. It's like, okay, this is vastly different.
Yeah, for sure. The earliest memory that I have of Dean Wint doing Barney was that We Are Family, like, music video they did for PBS.
Yes.
And he had his own distinct Barney sound, but it still sounded kind of like you're saying, with the inflection and things like that Bob and Tim were doing before he came in. But I remember the one thing that I do remember being thrown off when it came to that voice was, I don't know if you remember this, but when they did Round and Round We Go, that home video, by the time they released that, right after it went off, they had that clip of him in the park and talking about safety rules with like the new kids, and that was Dean Wint's voice, and that's where I was like, what? Like, it was a whole new set, new kids, new voice, new, and I was like, what is going on? And that's the one time that I do remember that I was kind of thrown off by the vastly different voice, because you come from that video where it was Tim doing the voice the entire time, and then you have Dean Wint with his complete own original voice. It really did throw you off as a kid. It was an odd placement. I don't even know why they did something like that, but it was very strange.
Because I mean, I got to check that release date, but like that tape was released in 2002. Like everything that we saw that Tim and Duncan did, all that was shot in 2000.
Right.
Like late 99, 2000. So then it just kind of spread out. So we'd have something, because there was a big hiatus between ending in 99, starting up in 2001, but we're not going to see that till the end of 2002. So kind of having to spread all those tapes. So like there was still a new Barney thing every year.
For sure.
And it looked like that was around the time they were filming like that bike episode. So thinking like, oh, we should add, we're talking about bikes, we should talk about bike safety. Like, yes, that's why they did that, but that was very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that I just realized we have in common, you said one thing that you remember is buying the Come On Over to Barney's house, like seeing it in stores.
Yes.
That's the earliest memory I have of getting a Barney video from the store as well. Like, my grandma would call me all the time and be like, hey, there's this Barney tape, is this new? And I could tell her, like, yeah, that's a new one, and she would buy it. Come on over to Barney's house. And I was actually at a family reunion out of state. That's the first time I remember seeing a Barney video that was new on the store shelf and buying it and taking it to like the family's house and imitating it. So that's funny, but I'm older than you, so I don't know why I don't remember a lot of seeing Barney content in stores or anything. That's like the only thing, that and Christmas Star were the only two that I remember seeing at a store and buying through childhood.
Yeah, that's my earliest memory. And then seeing, like, I mean, it's like I have so many tapes, and part of me always just wants to remember how, like, when did I just see these and find them? Like, they might have just been old or stuff that we just collected. And it's like the most memory I have is like, seeing Barney on shelves, like in definitely his later years, when it was mostly a lot of those clip shows they were selling, or those newer toys. I think when Riff came in, it was kind of a new explosion for Barney merch. And for sure. Like that. So I remember a lot of that happening, but at that point I was kind of gearing away from Barney and focusing more on becoming a puppeteer and watching more Sesame stuff.
Yeah. So did you have a moment then? That leads me right into this question. Did you have a moment where you did like grow out of Barney and kind of leave it behind for a while, or was it always just kind of around for you, just more on the back burner?
I'd say more of a back burner. So definitely when so I mentioned seasons 4 through 6, but seasons 7 and 8, they also have a place in my heart, because the writing was still pretty similar, and I was still at that young age that I could watch it. And then season 9 they kind of changed the format a little bit, and that sort of pushed me away.
Sure.
So not to the point where I stopped watching, but that was the first time when a Barney show would come on and it'd be that season that I would not watch it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't like the premise of these episodes, but I would still watch it. And then it just kind of, when Sesame stuff came into play and I said, I want to be a puppeteer, he kind of fell to the back burner.
Sure.
And I focused more on Muppets and Jim Henson and all that stuff. And, at that time, that's when Riff was starting.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm still keeping up with him because I'm like, oh, he's still on TV. Like, let me just see what he's up to. And then I think by like season 13, it kind of felt like it was coming back to what it was. I was like, okay, this is a pretty interesting season. I don't mind season 13, to be quite honest with you. It's weird, but I don't mind it too much. And then obviously season 14 was like recycled stuff, and that's when Barney kind of did die away. So I'm like, okay, I think I'm done with him now, and I'll focus on my other thing. And Barney really didn't come back for me until the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Brief little history here. So my buddy Sebastiano Ricci, who's another puppeteer, and he's a mega Barney fan. We realized we were separated at birth in terms of Barney stuff that we had, Blue's Clues, Sesame, all that stuff. And that kind of led us to the same path where we are now. I remember he found like I forgot what it was. It was like a listing of like the old like Barney binder. It was like, with like Irene Corey's designs and stuff like that. And I remember he like started a group chat and he sent it. He was like, who do I know who likes Barney? He remembered meeting me in 2018 at a puppeteer workshop. And he like added me, Bradley Freeman, Mark Tourette, who because he writes for your show. And then one of the Sedwan Hooks, who's another mega Barney fan. And then we just kind of all collabed in terms of we like Barney and like wanting to find out where this binder is and where all this interesting stuff is, all this interesting Barney stuff. And then, so before there was History Fans, and before there was even Plush Fans, we started a group called Retro Collectors. And that was just to kind of help us find the binder, but also show like maybe cool stuff we had, cool stuff that we knew some other people had. And that kind of, I think, sparked that Barney Facebook interest. Yeah. And then Plush Fans came after that, and then that kind of sparked History Fans. So it wasn't, then this whole renaissance that happened over social media, that's when Barney kind of fell back in my lap again, and I kind of rediscovered him in a different way.
That's so strange because I didn't realize Retro Collectors was around until like I think last year. For some reason, there was always like the very beginning of Facebook. There was the Barney fan club page that we had, and that was there because we all kind of migrated from YouTube to Facebook. But I didn't know that Retro Collectors even exist, and I was going to ask you about that here later on. But we can talk about it now. I didn't know that it existed before Plush Fans and History Fans and all that was around, which is really really cool history for that. Where are you guys sitting at now as far as because I'm a part of that group, but how many members are you sitting at now that's a part of that group?
Oh my gosh, I have to check because I'm not as good as keeping up with these groups, I'm gonna look it up as we're talking just so I can give you a good answer, but I'll talk while I'm doing this. Cool. Yeah, that's I want to say that started maybe like around like late 2020.
Okay.
Or so, because that's kind of when we started talking to each other, me and Sebastiano. It looks like we have 1.9K right now.
Nice.
So yeah, we're both the admins of that group, and I think I forgot, and then it just kind of got sent around. Like it was a public group, so anybody could join it. You had to do the whole thing of filling out questionnaires and stuff, but anybody could join it and just share their stuff that they had. It was mostly sharing stuff from Backyard Gang because that's kind of the era that Sebastiano enjoys. But then it was like it's still retro if it's like from the 90s. So it's like so then it just kind of expanded. Like, what do you have? What do you got that's cool? And then I think somebody had sent it to Jess Nelson. And so I think that also kind of showed him like, oh, people are interested in these dolls. It's like, yeah, people are interested in the plushes. And then other Barney fans found it, and then it's kind of exploded. So we're kind of sitting in the back in terms of Barney groups, but we still accept members. You can still post whatever you find. Yeah,
and it's still a great group to have around. By the time this episode comes out, Hedges episode would be out by that point. And we talked about how there's other groups that exist right now on Facebook. And it's a great amount of, they're all different. And actually, John Phelps is someone else that I talked to, and we talked a little bit more in depth with it with John, but how there's these different Barney groups: history fans, plush fans, retro collectors. John has Stupendous Fanatics. Hedge has started the art, like kind of Barney, like people showing off their Barney art. There's like a replica group, and these are all one common character, which is Barney, but they're all different in their own unique ways too, which just makes it a great like community of different groups. You can be in all these and get a little bit different of a Barney experience than you would in one of the other ones, which I think is great. So having your group around and then all these other ones, it's just a great like melting pot of Barney stuff that you can find, whether it's rare items or people doing artwork or history facts, whatever it is. So it's really cool. Did you guys expect it to pick up and become this thing when you guys created it, or did you think that it was just going to be this kind of little small kind of group that just existed for you guys kind of thing?
I think seeing how many people were like involved in like you said, there was only fan club on Facebook at the time, so I think we expected maybe all of them will join and hope, and I think we were hoping on maybe cast and crew would find it, give us some intel and like maybe where stuff is, or like what did they keep and all that stuff. So we did not expect it to go the way it did, and we also didn't expect like the other groups, like I said, Jess starting his, and then that kind of blowing up and finding more stories from him, and then history fans, where everything really kind of blew up to like now the some of the people in history fans helping out with the documentary that came out.
For sure.
Now we have the website that's up. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
And I love hearing the fact that cast and crew are finding us and realizing like, oh my gosh, like people really care about this stuff.
Yeah. I think that's what's great about it too, and I've said that before too, is like these cast and crew members, they care probably a little bit more, if not just as much as we care about this show and this franchise and this character. And you can see that in the way that they're one of the only communities where the people who worked on this show interact with the fans of that show on social media, right? There's not a lot of people that you can talk to on a show that you really love and enjoy who will take time and respond to you when they have a moment, like Bob does, like Jess does, Steve. So yeah, dude, it's really cool to have that experience. And I never dreamed or ever thought that would be a day where I could call these people my friends, or like I can write a comment to them and then respond kind of thing. So yeah, it's become this amazing thing that we have, which is it just solidifies even more, I think, our connection to this character that has been around from as long as we can remember, right? When you did the voice earlier, the Barney voice, how long? You said you were doing it as a kid, so you were imitating and being able to do the voice. How do you keep it? Has it just always kind of just stayed with you, or do you practice? Do you find yourself practicing the voice? You're a puppeteer, so I know that you have different voices and different levels and things like that you play around with. Does that come in handy when it's time to imitate a character like Barney's voice?
Oh, definitely. I mean, obviously, when I was doing it as a kid, it sounded nothing like him because puberty hadn't struck yet. It was hard to do many voices, but yeah, over time, I think because I was just so used to hearing, and I think when you get an ear for something, you're kind of used to how it should sound. And I just love imitating characters, and with Barney, I find it really fun because there's multiple Barneys.
Yeah.
It spans from, Bob, yes, but then there's like early Bob, there's like midway through Bob, and then there's like how Bob finished.
Yeah.
So there's like 3 different ways to do Bob's voice, and then there's like Tim and Duncan and Dean. Like there's many iterations of Dean. And I think that was another thing when I kind of joined the whole because I knew of people in the Barney community, but I wasn't really a part of it because I was more focused on other things. And And so when people kind of found out who I was, I think it was when I got my suit.
Yeah.
And I started doing TikTok video. My first one, and this will go into this story. So my first TikTok, I started TikTok during the pandemic, mostly to maybe probably do puppets on it. And also a bunch of puppeteers in the community said, you should try TikTok. It's fun. I was like, I didn't even do Vine when that was a thing. I was like, I don't feel like doing that. So I did like maybe a couple videos with puppets. And then I had my Barney suit on. I was on FaceTime with my cousin who loves Barney, and I wished her happy birthday. And I had a hoverboard.
Yeah.
And I had the head off, and I had my phone on the floor, and like, oh, this looks funny. It looks like Barney's riding a hoverboard.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? Just for, shits and giggles, I'll, hop on it and just record. And then I just did like a little ADR of me doing Bob's whistling. Oh, look, a hoverboard. I never thought I'd try one of these before. And surprisingly, that went viral.
Yeah.
And I think it was also due to mostly reading in the comments. It was like people thinking I was the real Barney because of the voice.
Yeah.
And sorry, Bob, if people are thinking that. I'm not you. So then that kind of blew up, and then people like Boltum and Matt Goldstein finding out about me, and like me recording like people's Barney shows for them if they wanted, like, because you notice like people that like them who were doing Barney shows, like, oh, they're taking bits and pieces from like tracks and trying to make a show out of it. And then now people calling me saying, can you record this 20-page script for me? I'm like, sure. Yeah, that kind of built me up in the community as, oh, he's the guy who can do every Barney voice.
Right. Yeah. Dude, so why let's talk about the costume for a second. What was your reasoning for buying a Barney costume for you specifically? Was it just something just to have, or why did you end up going the route and getting a Barney costume?
Yeah, it was something to have. It was something to add to my roster of characters. And at the time, like I said, this was during the pandemic, so to make side money, I was doing parties. People who were still having parties at the time, doing them with my little characters. I was like, I wonder how much traction Barney would get, because he's not well known anymore. But it was like millennial parents that would like hire me to do. I remember it was one party I did. It was for this girl she was turning 4, and they were like, I was like, I have Barney, and I have like this famous, well-known Muppet character that everybody knows that I won't name because I don't do that anymore. So they were like, she was like, she'll probably respond to the Muppet character because it's more famous. But she's like, I love Barney, and I would love Barney to do this. And I said, okay. And so I went and did that show. I come out dancing to the theme song, and no kid knows who I am. Yeah. No kid really knows who this character is. And this was, oh my gosh, I might tear up telling the story. So no kid really knew who I was. And, they know like the song, If You're Happy and You Know It, and all that stuff. So like they're playing along to that. But like, nobody knows Knickerbocker. Nobody really knows Raindrops or, those Barney songs. But, as I get further into doing that, they're kind of picking up on it. And it's like, oh, okay. And also in like, corner of what I can see, I also see the parents kind of like, oh yeah, I remember this song, yeah. And then like by the third verse of Raindrops, like all the kids are actually doing like and that's crazy, to the point where I finally get to I Love You. No kid has ever heard this song before, but they feel like this is an inviting song and a caring song that most of them got out of their chairs, and as I'm singing, they're all hugging Barney. They've never seen him, never heard the song, yet they feel like, I feel like this character loves me, and I love this character now. And so they're hugging me, and I leave, and they're all like waving goodbye and all that stuff. And the mom who hired me called me. She said, "Thank you so much for coming to the party." I said, "Sure, sure, sure." And she said, "I have a question." I was like, "Yes." She said, "All the parents are calling me asking, hey, where can we find Barney on television? Because now every kid at that party wants to go watch Barney." Wow. And at that point, he's not on PBS or Sprout anymore. So like, where can we find Barney? I said, well, he's on Netflix, or you can get Tubi or whatever. He's streaming on there. Find everything on YouTube. And it kind of started a little mini resurgence between those 12 kids at that party.
Wow. You know what? That's I kind of got chills when you talked about the I Love You part, because I've had that same experience. I bought my first Barney costume in like 2008, just as something to have for myself also. But I started also doing birthday parties, and my uncle had a store in the mall, so I would go do mall appearances and just be out in front of his store performing and things like that. And I'll show you My mom and grandma told me don't buy a Barney costume. They said it's the worst investment you can do. You don't need a Barney costume. And for me, I was working at the Omaha Zoo, and so it was my first job, and I was like, it's like my money, so I can spend it if I want to, kind of thing. And I did, and I had the ugliest costume, which is this one right here.
Oh.
And he was like that bluish color, like, and just terrible, but it was Barney, right? I would put it on and kids still felt like it was Barney. I eventually upgraded to one that looks more like it's a full suit. Like, I have the feet behind me right here.
Yep. Oh, there it is. Yep.
During the pandemic, I started doing performances just out in public. And I started doing it for free because, one, I knew it was a licensed character, but two, a lot of the people that looked like me couldn't afford these kind of characters at their parties, just like I couldn't growing up. And so I did it for free instead. That way a parent didn't have to say no because they couldn't afford whatever, you were charging, right? So I was doing free performances during COVID, and I went to a daycare, and it was the same thing. All these kids are 4 and younger. They have no idea who Barney is. But by the time I Love You came on, they were doing that same thing of they just feel, I think they just feel what that character brings through that music, and they just feel like they have to hug you kind of thing. I had an experience when I was at the mall playing Barney. A parent came up to me and they were crying, and it was because their kid like said Barney's name. But they were a kid who was supposed to be nonverbal, but that was the first time that they had heard them speak because of, and it wasn't about me, it was about this thing that I'm inside of, right? This costume being this character. And so I think that's a testament to just like how important Barney is. A lot of people are like, well, Barney's not popular, kids don't know Barney, but if you turn the show on, or if they meet this character, they're just drawn to it naturally, like we were when we were younger. And so it's cool because I have that same kind of a story, and it does kind of give you like, it makes you almost teary-eyed, or like make you kind of get chills, because it's just, you can't explain enough of what that experience is like. You just have to be there and witness it. You know what I mean? You can talk about it, but it's not the same as it is seeing these kids light up because they've seen, and this goes for any character. I start to witness this now with Mr. K too. Like, these kids see these characters that they believe in on TV, and then they see them in person, and you just see their world light up. And it's like, it's a thing that you're honored to be able to do and experience in that moment. So yeah, it's really cool.
And especially I would say the parents too. I would say definitely, because another thing I do with him. So every year on Halloween, I would do have my puppets. I'd take a puppet stage and have my puppets on my porch, and I would be like, saying hi to the kids and families as they walk by. Have them like take the candy out. And when I got Barney for the first year, I was like, let me see what happens if I take him out. And have him just stand there. And I think I I decorated the whole like outside like Halloween-y, and like I had my stereo, and I'm just like playing the instrumentals from the Halloween party video, like just on loop. And people were going, some kids did know who he was, but it was like mostly the parents, and this dad who was like definitely he was in his 30s, I would say. And you just hear him go like, and you could tell this guy was tired from walking his kids around all day. It's Halloween night. They're just trying to go to every house. And he's like, I don't want to be out here. Yeah. But he sees me like just waving at him like this. And he's like, I just hear him go, oh my gosh, it's Barney. And he just totally freaked out. And then again, and sorry, no copyright again, but because I can do the voice, I'm talking to people. And so the guy's already freaking out just seeing me. And then I say, hey, and he's like, oh my God. He literally thought it was real because I was talking to him. And guy's like taller than me. Even in the suit, he's taller than me. And I just waved by the kid like, happy Halloween. And he's like, Barney, man. He's like, I've loved you since I was a kid. He was like, I saw you on stage once. And I was like, oh, really? Where? And he's like, oh, I saw you at like Radio City, like back in the 90s. I was like, whoa, that show? And he was like, and I was like, really, what happened? Like, me as Barney is trying to get the history of this guy's story. And I'm like, oh, really, what happened? He was like, oh man, I just remember this bad guy like took your Barney bag away. And I was like, oh, he was at that show. I was like, that's crazy. And he's like, I just got to give you a hug. I was like, oh man, that was such a weird moment. I did not expect that to happen. Somebody coming up to me that went to see Radio City.
Yeah, man, that's insane, dude. But that's cool though, because you do, like that's just what I was just talking about. Like you get to have that experience, and it's not just we're in this world now where Barney isn't as hated or looked down on as he was even 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So like a lot of people are more open to sharing their love for Barney or letting it be known that they appreciate this character that didn't necessarily do that back in the day. So that's really cool experience because I've had a lot of those experiences too with adults and parents and them knowing the music and being reminded about their childhood. But I've also had, like, when I first started in like 2008 with that costume, dude, I would stand outside. I was outside of a store one time. My grandma went inside, and I don't know why I had this costume, but I had it with me. And so I was just outside of the store waving at traffic, and like people were flicking me off because they just didn't like. They were just upset with staying Barney. Like they were and now I can take Barney out, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's Barney!" Like it's a completely different. Even people who don't really want to interact with you, if you wave at them or something, like even if they give you like a slight like whatever, like they still like acknowledge you. That it didn't used to happen that way. So it's cool to be in the world that we're in now, and that's what I'm interested about seeing what happens when it comes to this refresh with this new reboot, and if the show and whatever they do with it is its own thing. But I kind of like how we've noticed what we noticed with Barbie and how Mattel really pushed that. I can see the top of next year being very purple, just like it was very pink this year. I'm interested to see what the reaction and what the reception is going to be to have Barney back on shelves and in like ads and things like that. And it's going to be, that's what I'm looking forward to when it comes to the reboot. How do you feel when it comes to, we have this new iteration? I call him Barney the Third. We have this new iteration of Barney. What was your initial reaction when this whole thing just randomly got sprung upon us in back in February?
Ooh, you're gonna have to censor this episode. No, I'm kidding. I think like anyone else, I was a little. I think that was, again, I think a lot of us talked about this because there was always like these weird rumors for years and years about Barney reboot, Barney reboot, Barney reboot, and all of us saying like, just please don't be animated. Just don't be animated. Not because animation's bad, just because that's so out of. For seeing him like that for 20 years, or more than that at this point, but at that point, and then like now it's like here's a completely new Barney. It threw us all off like it did anybody. But from someone who also works in children's entertainment, everything has to change with the times, whether we like it or not. This Barney that we're getting, we've heard everyone say this. We've heard Bob say this. We've heard, other people say this Barney that's coming is not ours. It is for the new kids that have not seen it. And, feel free to show kids. Like, I hope kids still get to somewhat see the Barney that we enjoyed here and there. The YouTube channel is still posting stuff pretty frequently recently. Hopefully they're looking at that stuff. But, this is a new Barney for them. The way this Barney is for them is the way our Barney was for us. This was something that we hadn't seen that we're falling in love with. And this is something that its kids hadn't seen and hope they fall in love with. But in terms of the Barney name in general, I'll just be happy to hear kids saying Barney again. Yeah.
And that's what I've been saying too. For me, it's really about, do they keep the core of this character? That's what's going to matter to me. Keeping who the character is, I could really care less if he's animated or live action. If he's the same Barney, I think that's what matters, because that's what being educational and loving people and that kind of thing is what Barney is. Live action was great, but live action I don't think is what made Barney successful. It's what Barney was being taught and who he was as a character is what, and the people that worked behind the scenes who understood that and believed in it is what made it successful. So taking it animation, it could be just as successful. Maybe not as successful, but it could be a type of success on its own if they don't completely ignore this character who's established. You know what I mean? So I'm waiting to kind of see what comes next. Because like if I show my daughter the new iteration of Barney. Same with the Backyard Gang. If I show her the blue dog, she recognizes it as Barney. There's not a moment where she has to think about who it is. It's instantly Barney. So that's what I'm excited about too, because we've always talked about in the fan club, like back when, especially when Purple Tails and those kind of things, when Carrie started doing the podcast, they always talked about we need Barney today. We need Barney today, blah, blah, right? Now, hopefully, as long as everything goes to plan, we'll have a Barney today that hopefully these young kids will have a connection to, like we did with ours. And like you said, and by the time this comes out, we would have entered Jen's episode would have dropped as well. She also mentioned that same thing where our classic Barney is still there too. So you can still have it as an adult if that's your thing, but you can also still show that to your kids. It doesn't have to be solely just this new iteration. So yeah, I'm trying to remain optimistic about it. We'll see what happens a year from now. Hopefully, all of our opinions on it were completely wrong, but we'll see.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit. We'll jump off Barney just for a little bit, and let's talk about what you do now, and how we talked a little bit about how Barney kind of played a part into your introduction for wanting to be a performer. What was the path to deciding, okay, maybe I don't want to be like myself as an actor, but the puppeteer route? What was that path like, and how did you get to where you are today? And I guess how's that going right now for you?
Sure. I can talk about some things, not a lot, because there's a strike happening. But I think so. Puppets were always around me. I loved shows like Sesame, Bear, Between the Lions, Puzzle Place. I loved all those shows while Barney was going on. So if Barney wasn't on, I was watching a puppet show. And so that kind of gave me the outlet to do voice. I love doing voices, and also the fact that with puppetry, you're not limited to just you. I could play a cowboy in the morning and a piece of cheese in the afternoon. Like, I could do just about anything playing puppets. And so I kind of just, started finding whatever puppet I could, like whether it was at a toy store or something I had lying around, and I would just, practice doing this in front of a mirror. Watching anything from Jim Henson, studying people like Carol Spinney, Kevin Clash, all those guys. And I was doing that for about 10 years up until at that point. So my mother, who works for Capital One, which is the big bank. So the Muppets, this is when their ABC series was coming out. And this is like 2015, 2016. And they were doing commercials for Subway and NFL and all that stuff, but they were going to do one for Capital One. And at that point, it had gotten around the office that, Lisa's son is a puppeteer and he's phenomenal. And so the guy who's like at the top of basically the owner of the company, face of the company, Capital One, when he heard the Muppets were doing his commercial, the first thing he said was, "My assistant has a son who's a great puppeteer. They have to meet him." Like, he just wanted them to see me so bad. But they were so crunched for time that they just didn't have time to do that. And I would have had to go to LA, and I didn't have time to do that. So, but they sent me it was Steve Whitmire at the time, and Eric Jacobson, Kermit and Piggy sent me 2 autograph photos, and they were keeping my name in mind. So they had now they had my name. And so a couple years passed. This is 2016, and they were like, "Is there anything you want to do?" I was like, "Well, I would really love to go to the Macy's parade. Maybe I could get a glimpse of the float, maybe meet the Sesame guys or whatever." And at that same year, the Muppets were going to open the parade that year, sing the big opening number.
Okay.
And so his team got together and got me a VIP meet and greet at their rehearsal to go meet all the main Muppet guys, just me. So that was my first time in New York, and I went and met all of them. I had a puppet with me, and they were like, all our names. We're assuming you're a puppeteer. And I was like, yes, I am. And so they kind of they let me put on a real Muppet, and they let me try out the monitor, and they were like, okay, he's got some good voices. And then I exchanged emails with Matt Vogel, who plays Kermit and Big Bird, but he's also the puppet captain at Sesame, so in charge of everything in terms of puppetry on set, and he does a lot of workshops. And at that time, he had invited me. We're starting a thing that's called the Mentee program. At that time, they were starting it. So then it was usually 500 applicants send in videos to try to get into this workshop. And I was one of them chosen out of 20 people that got to go do that. So that was just me in New York for 3 days, learning as much as I could about how the Muppets work. And then that progressed to doing another workshop the next year. And then I got my first audition for a recast of a character. And then I got to audition for another show that was called Helpsters. I got to audition for other characters. And so basically they just kept trying to bring me in some capacity. And then my first job was actually with the Muppets, the Disney Muppets. And I got to go do a parade at Disneyland for about 2 months at Christmas time. And that was crazy. I love performing live, especially doing characters, getting that initial reaction to things. I was doing Barney at the time, so doing that show. But this is the first time I've ever been to Disneyland, so this is crazy. The first time I've been to Disneyland, I'm working. That's crazy. Yeah. And just to be on this float, performing these characters that I love and all these people love, and there was like garland wrapped around the top deck where I was sitting, and I was able to poke a hole so I could see some stuff.
Yeah.
And just to see all the way down Main Street is just full of people just cheering these characters on.
Wow.
It was breathtaking. And for that to be the first thing I did, it was insane. So, and then after that, I started coming to do little YouTube videos for Sesame, and then the mentee program. Some people graduated, and then they brought new people in. I'm one of those people. So now I'm a mentee at Sesame Street.
Wow.
And I'll be approaching my second year of being involved with them. Or this is my second year. Yeah, so next March will be 3 years I've been with them.
Gee, time rolls fast, man.
And so it's weird, being a kid that loved Barney that said, I want to be on Barney, not thinking Barney's I think also there's something weird with Barney. I thought of him more real because he was more seen. I believed in Elmo and Kermit, but because they're hand puppets, sometimes you'll often see a mistake of the head getting a shot. So as a kid, it's like, there's something else going on here with these characters. But Barney is more real, and Big Bird. So I was like, if I want to be on Barney, I have to be a kid actor. Because I can't be Barney. He's real. But I was like, growing up wanting to be on Barney, and then kind of shifting to now I work for his competitor. Or he was in competition with them. He kind of blew them out of the water when he showed up on the scene. But, but yeah, that's what a lot of Barney history people, or a lot of Barney fans tell me, like, this is Brandon. He works for the traders. Like, hey, we're still going.
Yeah. Oh, burn.
Sorry. Well, he's getting a reboot, so how long that goes.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens there because, you have Mecha Builders now, which is going to be on the same network that this new thing is coming. So they're going to be in competition again. So I'm interested to see what happens.
You know what? Yes, that is interesting. Yeah. The fact that that Barney and Sesame are now going to inhabit the same network again.
Yep, it's interesting. I want to see what happens there. That's a really fascinating story, though. And you're one of very few people who get to have that experience, grow up with these shows, and now you get to work on a show like Sesame Street. I also wanted to be on Barney, and I also thought, I needed to be a kid actor. But then I wanted to be in the costume. So I told the story before, but I don't think I've ever told you. I had the opportunity to audition to play Barney when they were doing Birthday Bash. Also a year before that. That was in 2012 when they were getting ready to do the second leg of the tour. So they were recasting some people for some of the roles. And I was supposed to do a video submission. And there was a family emergency that I had that I missed the audition. So I didn't get a chance to audition to play Barney specifically. But it was V Corporation. And so they invited me to audition for Big Bird because they were doing a Sesame Street live show as well. And at that time, I was like, nah, man, I only want to work on Barney. I don't want to do Sesame Street stuff. And so I didn't submit the audition. And so some days I'm like, man, I wonder where I would be now had I just went ahead and took the opportunity to do that. But
you'd probably be working with me.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah. And, those kind of paths in our lives lead us to where we are now. So I enjoy Mr. K's Clubhouse and doing that thing. And that's my own thing that I've created. But I do wonder sometimes, man, because where would that have gotten me? I also had the opportunity to audition for Barney at Universal Studios for Day in the Park back in 2017. So right before they closed it during the pandemic, and I couldn't make it out to Florida to do the in-person audition, so I missed that opportunity too. So like, it's like there's a lot of near misses that I could have. I wish I would have been able to grab and have on, but I like where I'm at now. So those kind of things happen, and they kind of happen for a reason. So I'm cool with it. But yeah,
that show at Universal, man, I'm so glad. Like that was, I forgot who said this, but they were like, Universal was like a time capsule for Barney.
Yeah,
it's like they really didn't change anything to that show.
Right.
And I'm so upset. I will say, I don't know how many of us are there, but I'm one of the few big Barney fans. I never met him. I never met the character. I went to not Colorful World, sorry. I saw Musical Castle when it was originally touring, but I was very young. I don't have any memory of it. And that's also, I think that's also probably where I first heard the Wiggles, actually. Because they were
there.
I believe the leg I went to, they were still their intermission act.
Gotcha.
But that was the only time I ever saw Barney live, and I can't remember it. But I think my mom told me I was in fear, because believe it or not, someone who likes characters as much as I do, I was deathly afraid of costume characters, just because it's that thing you see them like you expect it like this, like small. But then he's like that big. And also, we were pretty close to the stage. So the stage is already high off the ground. So now he's just even taller.
Yeah.
And then like even doing things like, like I went to some theme parks as a kid. Like I went to King's Dominion, and that's when like Nickelodeon characters were running around. And, I was a big Rugrats fan. I loved the Rugrats. And I remember hearing the Rugrat music coming on. And I was like, oh, the Rugrats. But they're playing that so the characters can walk out. And just seeing like these giant-headed Rugrats that are like so stiff-faced. And it's like, it's so weird. It's like, this is not, especially with characters that are cartoons that usually aren't always depicted properly when they have to be made into mascots. It's like, this is so disgusting and it's so off-putting. I want to go home. And it's like, they're just so blank-faced. Barney, at least, was what we saw when he was live was what we saw on screen. So at least that was close. But it was just devastating. The fact that I love this character and the fact that he came out, I was crying because I'm scared of him.
That's hilarious. The only time I've never met Barney either, in like the being able to hug him or that kind of thing. I saw him live on the second leg of the Birthday Bash tour. Because by that time I was an adult, so I could pay for my own ticket. As a kid, when like Let's Go Touring things came, my family couldn't afford to buy tickets to take us there. We saw a lot of Sesame Street live though. When they were touring a lot when I was younger, but we didn't get a chance to see Barney much. So Birthday Bash I was an adult, so I took some daycare kids there, and I told this story too. That show, I forget that I've seen it because it was like it's the worst live show that they ever had. I like the remixed music and that kind of thing because I like hearing different. I'm a music guy, so I like hearing different takes on stuff. But I took a bunch of daycare kids, and none of them cared. They weren't even scared about Barney. They didn't even care that the characters were on stage. Like that's how non-important that show was to them. So that was kind of sad for me to see because I'm like, man, it's Barney. Like I would have been like having a field day, like seeing this as a kid, and those kids did not care at all. So, but that's the only time I got to see him live. I wish I was able to see the good, like the big shows where sets were changing and things like that, but I didn't get that experience. So I'm envious of anybody who's been, even if you don't remember it, knowing that you were at least there and had that experience at that time is a cool thing. I wish I would have had the opportunity for. That's what I'm looking forward to with the new show is they take it on tour. First of all, what does the tour look like? If it's like little dinosaurs with people behind them puppeteering them, I love puppeteers, Brandon, but I don't want to see like someone moving the mouth and stuff like this. So if it's something like that, I probably wouldn't pay for it. But we'll have to see.
It's hard to tell now because that is happening with a lot of shows nowadays. They're taking them, and sometimes it works. And sometimes it doesn't. I would hope they would keep him more full-bodied and not do because I enjoy that too in terms of being a puppeteer, but it is kind of off-putting seeing somebody behind these things.
Yeah, it's cool in like the sense of like Lion King, and that kind of thing. I like how Sesame Street did that show on Broadway. Was it last year? I think it was that they did, but it was the actual puppets, but they were like they did it like they do on the TV show. You don't see them. You just see the puppet.
The new musical.
Yeah. I like that. I don't want to see like Yeah, I don't want to see like Bluey with some guy walking behind him and like moving him and stuff. Like to me, that just it's like I don't want to see that. So I hope they don't do that when it comes to Barney. But if he's a kid, anything could happen. You never really know.
Yeah,
We'll have to wait and see.
do that. They do that to be very sincere to the characters because you never, especially with Muppets and Sesame, are very specific that they never want puppeteers to be seen.
Right. Yeah.
There's some stuff that we've done, like Sesame has done, like live in like concert halls, or like the Muppets did, like Take the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
We filmed them and they were on these big screens on the side, so people could watch the actual show, but they could go to stage, see us in full view. But we were doing it like we did the show, like we're on the floor. Sure. I'm saying it like I was there. I wasn't there. Yeah. We're on the floor and we're rolling around. And same thing when Bear would tour, they took the big Bear out, but and I loved how they did this because Bear, if you ever, sorry, this is a Barney podcast, but if you ever watched Bear in the Big Little House, it's all the set is all raised, so it's all trenches. So they would cut out parts of the floor, and puppeteers would get into it, and they would like put little barriers so Bear wouldn't walk into them. And when they did the tour, they did the same thing. There was like little parts of the set that were like raised, so like a character could get behind something, and there were little like trap doors in the floor, so you could like lift a flap up, and Tutter could pop up and be his actual size next to Bear, and not have a puppeteer on their knees, like just kind of doing this.
Yeah, man, and I like that. That's where you kind of see the children's entertainment industry get a little bit lazy when they stop doing those things. Like, because we know they're puppets to a sense, but they're also real to us. It's like a mascot costume where you're not supposed to talk. I mean, when it comes to Barney, if you can do the voice, it's a different thing. But if it's just a regular person talking and that voice is coming out of this character who's supposed to be Barney or whoever, then that breaks the whole like experience of this being the character. You know what I mean? So for me, if I'm seeing these puppeteers puppeteering on stage with the characters, it's hard to block them out and just see the characters and it just be the show. But I appreciate the puppeteers though, because I know how hard that work is. So it's not a down on those guys. I just myself don't prefer it. We'll see.
Understand.
Anyway, on this podcast, the other thing that we do for everyone is we always, when we invite guests on, we ask them to bring a Barney item or two. Sometimes it's three, depending on the person. That just kind of means a little bit more to you than maybe some of the other items that you own. Can you show us what item or items that you have with you today, and just explain why you chose those specific things?
Sure, I'll show a couple. Most of them I kind of put up here, but so I'll show a really cool thing that means a lot to me to have. This, I don't know if anybody recognizes this. So
cool.
This is a piece of original fleece from Miss Etiquette. That I got from a puppeteer friend of mine who works with Jim Krupa, and Jim Krupa built Miss Etta, Scooter, and Booker T. So he still had a bunch of scraps of Miss Etta laying. He doesn't have the puppets anymore. I think Hit Mattel may have kept those. So yeah, this is just really nice to have, and because being a puppet lover and being a Barney lover, my Dakin. I got this later in life, but this is just very special to me because as a kid wanting a Barney doll that was on screen so bad, and this being the closest I could get to that, not a season 4 through 6 doll, but this little guy. I love having him. I had like the bootleg version that had like a bow tie on it.
Oh yeah.
That wasn't good. This thing I got this year, so this was a signed photo I got from Bob on his Streamly, and get that glare out of it. But this means a lot to me to have because Bob has become a good friend of mine now. I remember my sister had got a cameo for me from him, like when I was still like auditioning for stuff, and she told him I was a puppeteer. And when Bob does these cameo calls, he'll like really go on a tangent and have like a real like discussion with you. So him just saying, he was very impressed that about me wanting to be a puppeteer, me getting auditions for Sesame, kind of just talking me up, and have like the voice of Barney like congratulating me on trying to pursue what I'm enjoying. And then when we found each other later because of the groups on Facebook, and he's like, "Oh, you're the same Brandon," and him finding out now that I have employment. Just had a very sincere, things to say to me. So, I absolutely love Bob, and it's been great getting to, have little conversations with him when I can.
For sure.
And then the last thing here. So this is just the guy I carried. This one, I had like so many Barney dolls. Like sometimes I would choose which one I'm taking out with me when I'd go somewhere. But this guy I took probably absolutely, and he's been through like, hell and back. There's like little marks on his tail here from when like my cousins who didn't like Barney, they took him away from me and they tried to set him on fire. But I saved him. I had a lot of Barneys destroyed by older cousins because they didn't like them. So I'm missing some Barneys that got like decapitated or burned or like flushed away. It's very sad. But and most other Barneys I had, I gave away to like new cousins that were being born or nieces and nephews and things like that. So
nice,
so,
man.
Yeah, this guy is very, very special to me.
Dope, man. Those are all really, really good. That's my favorite part of like the podcast, aside from the experiences and the history of everybody's backstories, but just seeing the different memories that these items have for people is always exciting. So those are all really cool, man. Glad you get to have that experience with Bob also, because it's almost like a surreal thing to have someone like that congratulate you, because that's the same way I feel with the show. Like we have, Bob's a fan of the show, Fred Holmes, Steve White, these guys, and even like this podcast, Dennis DeShazer reached out a couple weeks ago to Andrew to compliment him or us on this podcast and that kind of thing. So like those things are kind of, it's surreal to have that experience, but like we're grateful for that. And I'm glad that you get to have that friendship with Bob, because that's something that you do kind of hold that near and dear to you. But it also shows, how talented you are, and like people are recognizing you, and you deserve that as well. So that's awesome, man. Well, before we close it out here, my last question I kind of always ask everybody, and it's just also personal to you. So however you want to answer this, obviously. But why Barney? Why do you think Barney has been such an important piece in your life still to this moment?
He got me ready for a life that I wasn't expecting to have. Who knew that watching Barney in my basement doing the voice, dancing, singing along to it would lead to the best career I could ever ask for. And it's funny that talking to anybody in my family now, ask anybody, did you think Brandon would be doing this? Like, oh yes, we did not see Brandon having a desk job or working in an office. We're like, he's going to be doing something very creative. And I always say my two biggest inspirations were Jim Henson, and Barney. And I think without Barney in my life, I would not be who I am right now. Taught me about performing, but also just taught me to believe in myself. And I hope that in some way this new Barney does that for somebody else. So for some other shy kid out there that's like, I have all this energy that I don't feel comfortable bringing out as myself, and how do I do it? And hopefully finding that through Barney.
Definitely. Perfect, man. I don't think there's a better way to end this podcast. So we'll just end it right there. Thank you again, Brendan, so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a friend. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man. Shameless plug. Catch Brandon on Mr. K's Clubhouse in January. But yeah, it's just been a lot of fun. So thank you for taking the time to do this for us. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
For everyone in Barney History fans, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spots of Love. If you haven't already, fill out the Google form. It's linked to the website now, so you can go to BarneyHistoryFans.com and put your name in the hat if you'd like to be on the podcast. And who knows, one day maybe we'll see you here in your spot of love. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.